everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we'll discuss Reclaim Yourself, Discover the You That Was Never Lost. With our speaker today, Vaish, veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We're around 14 members on Zoom, and we do have quite a few members on social media as well. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you so much, Jam, for that warm welcome. And must say I'm delighted to be back here and great to see everybody here on a noon time show, or at least it is here in California, noon. Everyone okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, I'm excited about the topic today.
Elias is working on it.
Oh, me too. Always trying to work on it. It's constant work, right? So good to see you. And we're going into a topic which is perennially discussed, reclaiming yourself. And I love the subtitle today's program, which is Discover the You That Was Never Lost. That sounds hopeful, doesn't it? Have you ever been in a situation where you thought you lost something and then you found it? Or you did lose something technically because you couldn't find it, and then you found it. It's a great relief. And one of the ancient wisdom literatures, the Srimad Bhagavatam, talks about the process of reclaiming or finding oneself after having lost oneself, and gives this analogy of a poor person who's lamenting his lot in life, that he doesn't have much and doesn't see much prospect. And once he met an interlocutor who notices that the person who's loitering, leaning on a tree, has something around his neck. And the passerby who has started a conversation with this forlorn person says, "Oh, by the way, what is that hanging around your neck?" To which the forlorn, lost person is somewhat surprised and then feels around his neck and remembers that there's a chain, but he doesn't remember what's on the chain. And then he pulls it out and realizes that there's a jewel, but not just any jewel. It's an invaluable jewel that was passed down to him. And it was from antiquity in his family. And it was worth a fortune, a king's fortune. And suddenly, having remembered that he had it, he changes his mood. And it doesn't take long, only the immediate recognition that it's there reassures him that everything's going to be all right, at least financially. And so this is given as an analogy for us that we forget what's actually important, and it's the jewel of our own being. We're alive, and we've always been alive, and we always will be alive. Is a question that I entertained a lot when I was a child. If I'm here now, how can I not be here in the future? That, wouldn't you say, relates something to do with selfhood, which is philosophized about quite frequently. Oftentimes, nowadays, people have various philosophies about the self, not just nowadays, historically as well. And one of those ideas is that we don't have a self, or if we do, it's only an epiphenomenon that appears and then disappears, for instance, like a bubble on a wave that comes in onto the beach, and you may see the bubble and it seems to be an entity, but as soon as it pops, It's not there anymore. This is a sense of self that some people have, that it's a temporary manifestation of some combination of the material elements that somehow or other renders that individual unit conscious, or that individual unit perceives selfhood, and it's not actual, it's only a passing phenomena. Other people have ideas about the self being eternal, but it comes into existence at a particular time. This also is untenable, because if something's eternal, it always existed and always will exist, and it exists now. A metaphor that is quite helpful in understanding the bhakti tradition that comes from the ancient wisdom literatures, and which teaches that the self is substantial, so substantial that one that it has always existed. It exists now and it will exist in the future. That is, our personhood is a real thing. It's not a phenomena that comes because of a chance meeting of certain elements, and then once those are again in flux, then our sense of self is lost. Rather, the example of the sun is given, and that the sun is there and the sun rays are there, and they exist simultaneously. So similarly, the Srimad Bhagavatam says that our original source, which we would, in the metaphor, which would be the sun, and we are also co-eternal, because we're part of that original whole that's fully conscious and fully independent. That is, it has free will. We similarly have same qualities, except in minute quantity. The sun has all the power and we have minute power, but we both have personhood. So the theory behind what I'm going to talk about today is that personhood is real. It's not an epiphenomenon. It's not ephemeral. It's not coming and then going. It's always there. What's coming and going is our perception of ourself, or I'll restate that, our misperception of self. We look at the mind, which is more or less like a movie screen, and we see our life situation. We develop a persona in looking at our mind, and we subscribe to that as this is me. And as I go through my life situation in that drama of our lives, the life situation that we're in, and we see that it's changing, we think we're changing. Another metaphor about the changes of life is given in the wisdom literatures about the moon. The moon is whole, it's always whole, but to our vision, it's changing. Every night it changes a little bit at a time. It's either waning or waxing. And we could compare our minds to the moon. And when we're looking at our minds and we're misidentifying ourselves as a persona, which is manifested in this world, and part of our persona is that we've taken on a particular body and mind, but when we misidentify ourselves as that body and mind, and it's changing, we think we're changing. We might even think, I'm young, or we might even think, I'm middle-aged, or I might think, I'm old. I might think I'm dying, but none of these is true, because the self is jewel-like. It is not subjected to the changes of the world. It's only our misidentification with them. This is the opinion of the Bhagavad Gita and the ancient wisdom literatures, but it's also an opinion of modern psychology, specifically Jung, who I'll be comparing and contrasting today. I'll be comparing and contrasting Jung's ideas about selfhood with the Bhagavad Gita. So, first and foremost, looking at a slide number 2, we have what you are is satisfying and beautiful. Now, proof that we misidentify our self as the body, we would hope that the body and mind is satisfying and beautiful, but good luck with that because no one's ever satisfied with his or her state of mind or the state of one's body because it's always changing and it's disconcerting. Well, at least we may discover that we never feel quite whole when we consider ourselves our body. So here are a few of the tenets of self-discovery through Jung and the Bhagavad Gita. 1, who you are beyond your name, job, personalities, and memories is something substantial. So both the Bhagavad Gita and Jung ask this question and ask us to consider this seriously. Who are you? Now, what about your name? I see that almost everybody here has a name, or at least a couple syllables that represent your name. Where'd you get them? Well, when you were born, probably your parents, unless you were abandoned somewhere, somebody else did it for you, thought of a name and they signed it on a birth document. And then they came in and told you many times, here's your name. You get a name tag when you're born. But think about that. Who are you really? You're a traveler. You came into a body and you came out of a mother's womb. And you're really a nondescript entity at that time until somebody comes along and claims you and says, this is who you are. This is your name. Your name's Shiva. Your name's Radha Kripa. Yours JM. Mine was William. There are all these labels. But do you get to keep that name? No. When you leave this body, that name tag will be obsolete. Of course, if you're really famous, you might be in history for a little while, but not forever. Eventually, people will forget that name and it'll move on, and so will you. And the second tenet, self-discovery through Jung and Bhagavad Gita, these are parallels. Reclaiming yourself is not creating a self, but uncovering the eternal self that already exists. You're not creating a self. This creation of self takes place on a psychological level. It's not the essence of who we are, however. What do I mean by that? In sociological, psychological terms, we take on a persona in this world. What are some personas we take on from the time that we're born? I'm not going to do all the talking today. You all are going to help me out, I hope. Let's name 3, put them in the chat box, just to get warmed up. 3 personas that you take on just after you're born, besides the name tag thing that I already said.
Son or daughter.
You took 2. Okay, son or daughter, child, daughter, friend, student. Okay, good. Thank you very much, everybody. These are various designations that I'm a child, I'm an aunt, I'm a mentor, daughter, friend, student. And these are not absolutely stable, are they? Because friend, we may be a friend to somebody and then we may be an enemy. That could change. We may be a student and then we become the teacher. And we may be a daughter, but then later on we become a mother. You're a child. But in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, quoting the Sanskrit, Dehino sminyata dehe, ko maranyavaramjara, tata dehan tarapraptir, tiras tatra namuyati. Self-realization occurs when someone becomes aware that all of these designations, starting with Kumara, I'm a child, Yovanam, I'm a youth, Jara, I'm old, these are all temporary labels for a ever-changing body. And a person who is dhira, self-realized, isn't disturbed by these changes because he or she sees that, yeah, that's going on. That's a phenomena and a product of the material world of which I am not a part. Self is different from the body, self is different from the mind. These are both claims made by Jung and by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. And self-realization means what's beyond that, what's beyond the body, metaphysical. This is a metaphysical process. And we're acquainted with metaphysical elements in our life. For instance, we have a sense of ethics, don't we? Say yes, hopefully. And there's a way in which measuring ethics, as you may measure the sound coming from my gardener outside as well, measuring ethics is not something you can do with a physical tool. Can you go to, well, let me think of a place, Home Depot, my least favorite place on the earth. Not because I hate that, I just don't like, you can't get any help in there. Home Depot. And good luck asking for any help. And if you could find help, if you asked him for a meter that you could hook up to yourself or somebody else to measure their level of ethical responsibility, what would they say? No, we don't have that. Or how about compassion? You get a little band that goes around your head or something like that. It's a meter. It shows how much compassion you have. We know it's there, but you can't measure it materially. That's because it's metaphysical. It's beyond the physical realm. And this is one of the main teachings in the Bhagavad Gita. It's the idea of understand your categories of energy. This is first grade, second grade. You know, when you have those little desks you got to cram into, you can't get, they're hard to get into. The desktop opens. This is primary education in the spiritual circle, which is to understand the categories of energy in the world. There are inferior and superior qualities of energy. It's not all one. It's not all one thing. There's a difference between the ever-changing material energy and consciousness. Consciousness is not subjected to the same rules that matter is because they're categorically different energies. And one who understands that is known to be spiritually aware. That's called tattva darshi. Tat means that category you can identify and point to. It's a demonstrative pronoun, the same as the word that in English, with it just add an H. It's the same word, but it comes from Sanskrit. And if you understand those differences, you can also understand that the material energy is identifiable as ever-changing, whereas the self, the conscious self that we are, is eternally a fact, and it doesn't change. So Jung says the same thing that Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, which is reclaiming yourself is not creating a self, but uncovering the eternal self that already exists. To me, that's good news, because creating a self sounds difficult. I mean, if it's hard putting together an IKEA cabinet, which I just will not do, I'll pay whatever extra there is so I don't have to read those directions, I guarantee you. What to speak of assembling a self? And that's what we do constantly in this world. That's why we're always so confounded, because we're always trying to create a self. What is my relationship now when I go to kindergarten with all these other kids that I never met before? What about in fifth grade? How do I adapt? Should I wear jeans or corduroys or should I wear shorts? Who should I be like? Which identity should I take on now? And throughout our lives, trying to create a persona based on the material body and mind is extremely troublesome. And what to speak of the fact that it's untenable, you can't hold it. Whatever identity you have now, it will be diminished, it will change, it'll be lost completely at a certain point. So this is one of the tenets of the teachings of Jung and the Bhagavad Gita. And finally, we have this statement: modern psychology and ancient wisdom both address this with beautiful parallels and profound differences. So let's go into a few more of them. The problem, losing the self. This is our problem. We've lost ourselves. And the ancient Upanishads, this is called Atmaha, death of the self. There is no death of the self, but we conceive that our self has died and we lose sense of our real self. And when we do that, we get into this trap. So Jung says we get trapped in personas, masks, he calls them, living for society's expectations. This is a sociological fact. Everyone is working very hard to put on the right mask in order to fit in. It's one of the deep needs of the human psyche. I have to fit in with everybody else. Therefore, I'll wear the appropriate mask at the appropriate time, whether it's in relationship to the family or to the greater society. One has to play a certain role and assume a certain sort of mask. He also says the unconscious gets repressed, leading to alienation and neurosis. I'll read that again. Maybe it resonates. The unconscious gets repressed, leading to alienation and neurosis. And here's some from the Bhagavad Gita. I'll give some summary comparison between what Jung said and what Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. The soul, Atma, identifies with the temporary body and mind. This phenomena is called Maya, which means it's a mistake. And it forgets its eternal divine nature. If you remember your eternal divine nature and you're aware of it, you don't have a problem. The problem comes when you forget it. Next, this leads to suffering and endless rebirth. This is called samsara. One thing leads to another. The world is accommodating our desires, and our misguided sense of self leads us to misguided desires, which are then accommodated by this material nature, which is very mechanical. And we end up moving from one temporary situation to another. And in each one of them, we're striving for something that cannot be achieved. We cannot find permanence in a temporary world. That's our problem. I already quoted from the Bhagavad Gita about how the body's always changing. If you ask somebody, how old are you? If I ask somebody on this Zoom today, which I won't do, and you told me a number, I would say you are incorrect. And you might say, what are you talking about? You don't know me. It's like, well, I know you in the context of this conversation that you're not your body. So if you told me you were 32, I would say you are incorrect because you are not 32. Your body is 32. And you are something beyond the body. You're a metaphysical entity. You're not part of the body. You're a passenger in the body. And if you made a similar categorical mistake by saying, I am my car, has anybody ever said that? Maybe not, but they said, you hit my car or you hit me. That's almost the same thing, that you're identifying yourself as a car. Okay, we have something here.
It's
Alicia?
from
Yeah.
Erika, who says, now my sense of humor sometimes is 12 years old. I know my sense of humor is sometimes 12 years
Ah,
old.
ha, ha, ha. Pretty funny. Well, you can tell mine is probably 2 years less than that. Then in the Gita, Krishna also says this is illusory energy, illusory. Let me look that up for all of us. I know you know what it means, but I'm just looking it up because that's what I do. Illusory. Illusory, based on illusion, not real. And yeah, give me illusion. That's what I want. There's a way, somebody look it up. I want the etymology of illusion. And I don't want to take my eyes off the screen here. So there is a state that one can slip into, which is illusory. And in that state, it's very difficult to overcome that situation unless one has a methodology. It's necessary. Illusion, mockery, scorning, derision, active deception. Let's see where it comes from. Latin, a mocking, jesting, jeering irony from past participle stem of eludere, to mock at, literally to play with, from assimilated from in, at, upon, ludere, to play. That is like the play of the external energy, like shadows on the wall, and we think, oh, that's scary, but it's just shadows. We're creating it ourselves. So that's difficult to overcome. So that's why Jung goes into the study of psychology to figure out how to overcome the illusion. And Bhagavad Gita, why was it spoken? Very specifically because Krishna's student, Arjuna, the great warrior, fell into illusion. And Krishna was dispelling that illusion. Fortunately, it was recorded. And that brings us to something I think that is encouraging. And that's the next slide, which is the path of reclaiming the self. What's your goal this year? Reclaim myself. That's the most important thing we could do because once we've reclaimed the self, we don't have any more problems. So here's Carl Jung's individuation. This was his terminology for the process of reclaiming the self. He said, confront your unconscious mind. He called it shadow work. Very interesting shadow work. I'll go back to that in a second. He said, integrate all parts of your psyche and move towards wholeness beyond ego. And that in relationship with the Bhagavad Gita would be called false ego, because ego literally just means self. And we are a self, so you can't give up the self. But you can't have a full sense of self. And that's technically what Jung means in this point. Okay. LV gave misleading, unreal, erroneous. How does one integrate their shadow? Well, SI, and I don't know how to say the rest of your name because I don't know what it stands for, but that's what I'm going to talk about now. Uh, First of all, a couple of quotes from Jung. Conscious confrontation. He talks about acknowledgement and honest recognition that you have a shadow. And that by that he means unconscious traits. For instance, um, there are impulses that we have, things we're predisposed to, maybe even lower impulses, and acknowledging them. So he says unconscious traits you deny, suppress, or project to others. He says that the shadow often appears first through projection. When you strongly dislike or admire something in others, it often points to something unresolved within yourself. And get ready for his quote, because this sums it up as his means of dealing with that. And that is everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. I like that a lot. There's a way in which when we don't like something about someone else, yeah, that's because it's in us. And then he talks about conscious confrontation and dialogue, that once you recognize the shadow material, and that is that you're being compelled to act in certain ways. You're not free to act, your mind's telling you what to do. If you've ever found yourself stuck in a bad habit, you're being compelled by a force beyond your conscious awareness. That's an example of a shadow. And he says, this is my favorite quote, he says, that he makes here about this. By acceptance, he says, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. And when you become aware of it and you admit it, it brings the light of conscious awareness to it. So, how does that parallel with the Bhagavad Gita? First of all, there's a discussion in the Bhagavad Gita about conquering the restless mind. And what is that restlessness? These are impressions that we have in the mind. These are also called samskara. Samskara means impression. And we have them from our interaction with the illusory world. And not just from this life, because in the presentation of the Bhagavad Gita, we're on a continuum. Yes, we came into a hospital, somebody slapped a name tag on us, but that's not our first time. We've been through multiple lifetimes. We're travelers. We go from one body to the next, but we take the subtle mind with us when we enter a new gross material body. And when you come into the next body, you still have those impressions from previous experiences. There is empirical evidence to substantiate this claim, although it's not needed if you accept certain axiomatic truths, for instance, coming from the Bhagavad Gita. Nonetheless, I'll just mention it briefly, not as my main point of reference, but there is a department at University of Virginia that studies a specific phenomena in children where they remember their past lives in a short window of time, a small window of time when they're young. And academically, or I should say, there's a department there which was endowed by a wealthy philanthropist who wanted somewhere in academia that reincarnation be studied. And these children give accurate accounts of their last life, where they lived, who their parents were, the circumstances many times under which they died, and so forth. And these can be traced out. And any pseudoscience has been ruled out because of the discipline in their studies. Okay, conquering the restless mind is part of the process, because if we subscribe to the ideas that our mind gives us, then we'll be constantly on the run. Next in Bhagavad Gita, see the self as distinct from the body and mind. I've already mentioned that several times. Recognize the super soul, the Paramatma within, is one of the themes of Bhagavad Gita. We're not alone. There's a higher source of knowledge and intelligence that comes from within. Many poets like Blake and thinkers from all disciplines have noticed that, and what to speak of cultures, have noticed that there's an intelligence in the universe. And it comes to us as if we're being guided by a higher authority. In Bhagavad Gita, this is called the super self. And that Giving oneself to Krishna means our original divine source and linking through the yoga, linking our consciousness with our source, with that super self. We can transcend the illusory world. So this goes as evidence to describe how our identity is uncovered and not invented. And I'm going to the next slide, and then I'm going to take discussion and questions if there are any. The nature of the true self. Everybody ready? Okay, everyone I can see seems ready. All right. In Jungian terms, the self is the organizing totality beyond the ego. And that phrase beyond the ego is very much compatible with the idea of the Bhagavad Gita, or in the sense that Jung means it, the false ego. Beyond our sense of our erroneous sense of self in this world, there is an organizing intelligence. In the Gita, the Atma is eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. That's called Sat Chit Ananda. So Sat means eternality, Chit means knowledge, and Ananda means happiness. That's the nature of ourself. We are eternal parts of the Supreme Whole. And the Supreme Whole has this quality of Sat Chit Ananda, and we're identical in quality, just not in quantity. I see questions coming up. I'm coming right to them. And here's some contrasts. What would this discussion be without contrasting? Jung stops at wholeness of self-awareness, whereas the Gita points beyond not just knowing yourself, but knowing the Supreme Self, Krishna, and making a loving connection, which is actually the definition of yoga. Yoga means, it comes from the root word yuj, which means to connect. To reconnect our consciousness beyond our false sense of the body to the supreme whole, the supreme consciousness. And when that connection is made out of love and gratitude through the process we call bhakti yoga, then one experiences one's full potential in life. And you can do it even if you live in Silicon Valley, or let's have a shout out where everyone's from. Come on, shout
Sacramento.
out. Sacramento. Thank you, Nirali. We only Palo Alto. We got some pretty fancy cities here on the list. Anyone else? No one wants to reveal where you're from. Okay.
Oh, we
Oh, there
have
we go. San Ramon, Arizona, TT, welcome. Portland, SI, fantastic. Fremont, Baltimore. I love Baltimore. Phoenix, Portland, Sacramento, Folsom. Okay. Even if you live in one of those places, you can enact the process of bhakti yoga and reconnect with supreme consciousness. And it doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter what your hairstyle is. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter what kind of body you have. Well, it helps to be human because humans have a special proclivity for self-realization, but you can achieve it. The main point is to realize your true identity, uncover it from beyond. And after we have a short discussion, or long, whichever, it's up to you. It could be really short if you don't say anything, or it could be longer if you do. We'll go on to some obstacles to reclaiming yourself. You don't want to miss that. And I'll just say that an ultimatum, I'm not going to move on unless you cooperate with me and give some good questions and reflections. Are you ready? Okay.
there are a few on the chat. Oh, Zila, go ahead.
No, just giving verbal feedback ready.
Yes, verbal feedback is very much wanted. Go for it.
Oh, you guys are waiting on me? Like, I just am giving you verbal feedback, but I didn't have a specific comment. I put a few in the chat, but JM can read them
Well,
if he wants,
verbal
or I can read
feedback,
them,
that
I guess.
proves your selfhood. Otherwise, you're a conscious being. You wouldn't be able
Okay.
to give verbal feedback unless you were a person. So, well, I mean, I guess an AI robot could, but we could throw a few curveballs at you and see how you do. Okay, let's go to the chat box. And anybody else wants to speak up, be
Yeah.
unceremonious. Just
Yeah.
start talking. You don't even have to raise
Then
your
Yeah.
hand.
I
I would
never
love
put
Zila
my,
to go ahead and read. Yeah.
yeah, that's what I was thinking too, JM. So as you were talking before, Vaish, I was wondering if you never read the ancient texts as he developed his philosophy. And then as you spoke about this self-realization, made me think of the Matrix.
Yes, very much so. All except for the conclusion. A lot of these types of dramas that are created have uh, parallels, but then they veer off because for lack of knowledge of a higher engagement, they usually end up with the same kinds of romantic ideas in the material world about how to be happy. And they loop back without a complete solution. But Matrix definitely resonates with this idea of an illusory world in the sense that we're fully convinced and we get fitted. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 15th chapter, Krishna talking about reincarnation talks, he uses Rashotram Chakshu Sparshanam Cha Rasanam Granam Evacha Adhishtayam Manas Chayam Vishayan Upasevate. That according to the consciousness in which you left your last life, you get fitted with a new kind of a new equipment, which means Shotram, ears, Chakshu, eyes, Sparshanam, sense of touch, rasanam, what you can taste, and so forth. It goes on and on from there. All these senses are custom made for you, and you're fitted with them. This body is very fitted, isn't it? Try to feel it. Yeah, I'm fitted right in here, and everything moves like move my hand. Okay, there it goes. Ring, ring, ring. You can move around just by thinking about it. It's mechanical, but you're not mechanical. And then I have this whole sense of an alternative reality. But I don't realize I'm being manipulated. And that's one of the main points of the Bhagavad Gita. We're manipulated by our own false sense of self. And we go for things that are not healthy for us. And we're exploited by the material nature. So when you become self-realized, you become independent. You're able to rise above the matrix and come to a true sense of your self beyond the fetters of matter.
So then we can all get cool like black overcoats and glasses, right? Once
I'm going to do it on
we
the next show just to freak everybody out. Don't tempt me now. I'm going to go.
Yeah, actually, I have a follow-up question with that. So
Yeah.
I feel like we keep trying. We feel sometimes connection, but we get disconnected. And like you said, this outside material world manipulates us, or at least plays with our mind, right? How, I mean, I feel like I get lost a lot more than found. Some things come up and feel lost and then come back and trying to find my way back to, like, say, realizing Paramatma and then not the self and not to worry about how the world is coming about, or how everything going around tragedy or things going. So it's I feel the feeling of loss sometimes. It's
Yeah.
a bit.
And this is much to the point. Thanks, Nirali. It's much to the point. When we're not connected to the real self. In other words, when we forget, remember the story at the beginning? The poor, forlorn person who forgot that he was rich. He had an invaluable jewel around his neck. We can forget that. We're surrounded by illusory energy right now. And unless we have a process, and I said that at the beginning also, you need a process to rise above the illusory sense of self. This is a fact. And when we don't do that, then we slip back into the illusory sense. So practice means that you have something regular to do that brings you into the reality of yourself and uncovers the self and your connection with the super self. So that's why there's a practice called bhakti yoga. That's a way of life. And what can you do? everything can be connected. For instance, your work. You can work out of a sense of profit, or you can work out of a sense of service. And I'm talking in any realm.
Mm.
And one of the tenets of Bhagavad Gita called karma yoga means your work can be motivated by polar opposite intentions. If you're working for yourself, you have to take the burden of the result, good or bad. And
Mm.
they're both burdens according to Bhagavad Gita. But if you work for service, you're not claiming the result of your work. You're saying, I'm offering this to the Supreme. And then there are other aspects of what's called bhakti yoga. It's called Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Pada Sevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atman Nivedanam. Believe it or not, that was 9 different
Mm.
processes that you can act. And the first two are most important. They're called hearing and chanting.
Mm.
So to the degree that you're able to implement those in your daily life, to that degree, your internet connection is whole. You know, you hate it when you're talking on the phone and you're like, what? Can't hear because the internet connection is not correct. You can't get a clear signal. So you have to have that in your life on a regular daily basis. And when that connection's strong, there is no sense of illusion, loneliness, being forlorn because you know, oh, what I am is more important than what I have. What I am is more important than my life situation. It's not a mental construct, it's what is real. There's reality and there's illusion. And illusion means that which is always changing. So when we reorient ourselves and have a solid way of connecting to ourself,
Mm.
for instance, there's the hearing from these very authorized spiritual texts. And if you listen to them every day before you start trying to move in the material world, then you're far less likely to be overcome and feel overwhelmed by the whole situation.
Yes, yes, definitely that helps. But yeah, you're right. If it's not the routine part of you, then you get lost again. So thank you for that. Yes.
That's right. Yeah, as soon as you get off, just don't get off the boat.
Yeah.
Never get off the boat.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nirali. What else?
We have a few more questions. One of them is from SI stating, from Nicholas saying, is the self also the explanation of the ego?
Ego means self, period. That's what the word means. Look it up, somebody, and put it on the screen. You can look at the etymology. It just means self. But I was making a distinction in describing this terminology, and really it is semantics. But the fact is, the Bhagavad Gita's definition, the self is who we are. We are a self. We're a unit of consciousness, and we have selfhood. In other words, we exist as a personality beyond the body. When we misidentify ourselves as the physical or mental body, that is called false ego. It's a sense of self, but it's wrong. It's perverted. And therefore, there's this distinction between real ego and false ego. What satisfies us is when we come to the sense of real ego. Who am I really? Beyond the assumed identities of this world. I mean, one person you can interview, go out for an interview today, take a microphone and a little tape, not a tape player, you won't be able to find a tape player. Use your use your smartphone and just interview as many living beings as you can on your block. That's your homework for today. And say I walk out the door and I meet my gardener who's right outside. I can hear her clipping out there. And I say, "Who are you?" And she'll say, "I'm such and such from so and so." And then I'll walk a little further and I'll see a cat. And I'll say to the cat, "Who are you?" And he goes like, what are you talking about? I'm a cat. And then I might meet a dog and I'll say, "Who are you?" I'm a dog. But these are all, according to the Bhagavad Gita, these are false designations because what's a dog can become a cat in the next life, and what's a man become a woman in the next life, or even in this life. I mean, the body is malleable. It's always changing. And what's young now, I'm a young man. Oh, just wait a few years. You're going to be old. It just, you can't put your finger on it. That's the sense of falsity that bewilders us in this world. Hope that helped.
Thank you. I was just reminded of a story. A spy had gone to an enemy country and in a different name and shape, etc., to hide its identity and collect all the intelligence, always in constant anxiety of not being caught. And once he returned to the country and shared the story of how he successfully evaded, and he was very relaxed and he can share all the stories now of how he tricked everyone and etc. So I was just that came to my mind when you were reflecting how when we identify with the try to pretend, we become very anxious. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry, please.
No, please go ahead.
As I said, isn't Krishna or the higher self or Krishna just an idea?
Where's the question?
The question is, isn't Krishna slash the higher self just an idea?
No, their ideas are physical, but they're subtle physical matter. And beyond that category of energy, the material energy, there's another category of energy, which is called internal or Vishnu Tattva, which is beyond the material energy and beyond the thought world. And it is that's substance, it's real substance and it's reality. So the theory of Bhagavad Gita is that there are different categories of energy. And what you can conjure in your mind is not necessarily reality, because the thoughts that you conjure are combinations and permutations of your experiences. And this would be coming from what Jung talks about as the shadow mind, and the shadow aspect of yourself, which is the conglomeration of all the experiences you've had in this world that are being recreated in your mind in different combinations and permutations. And if you conjure something, it's different from the actual thing itself, which is reality. And when it comes to the reality, the higher energy, that is substantial, whereas the lower energy, including the thought world, is not. It's constantly changing and morphing into other things. Just like when you dream, you might have an idea that you're being chased by a tiger, and then a few minutes later, you're chasing the tiger, or the tiger turns into a movie star, and then you're friends with the movie star. These are all ideas that are constantly changing, whereas reality doesn't change like that. There's activity and variety in reality, but it's a different experience altogether than the thought world. JM, I have a few more slides. I know if I don't finish them now, I may never do it. Let me try, and then we'll take the last couple questions. So Jung talks about the obstacles to individuation, coming to a sense of one's real self. He said ego attachments. He mentions desires and fears and false identification with the material world. These are parallel with the Bhagavad Gita. And solutions, inner discipline. What is that inner discipline? It's using your intelligence to distinguish between what is material and what is conscious energy. Two different categories of energy. When you're able to see the difference between both, and that inner discipline arises from spiritual knowledge and association with teachers who are on that level. That's the third one. And then the second one is humility and surrender. Surrender to the fact that you don't know everything. In fact, that's something we've been discussing with Professor Sloman of Brown University, who wrote the book, The Knowledge of Illusion, The Knowledge Illusion. And in that, he points out from he's a psychologist, that there's a way in which we assume we know many things, but we don't. And one of the tenets of Bhagavad Gita is to accept a position of not knowing anything and being open to revelation, which comes readily by the inner disciplines, the association with spiritual knowledge. And finally, the result, freedom and fulfillment. What's in it for you? Well, Jung said, individuated person is authentic and they're integrated. That is, they have comprehensive knowledge of what's what, and they're free from unconscious bondage. I like that phrase. What do you think? We don't even know we're bound, and we don't know why we're bound, even if we become aware of it, and it's hard to let go of. But a person who has done the inner work can come to that point of being free from unconscious bondage. Bhagavad Gita, self-realized soul is peaceful, fearless, joyful, and reunited with Source, Krishna. So, the conclusion, a call to reclaim yourself. After all, that is the title of this. Reclaim yourself. You are already eternal, pure, and connected to the Supreme. Reclaim yourself, not by inventing, but by realizing. And in the Gita, there's no possibility of happiness for one who is not self-realized, or Jung would say, individualized. And reclaim yourself and discover the joy and freedom of your eternal nature. I misspoke. It's not individualized, it's individuated. That's his coined word that he used to describe this phenomenon. Now we have 3 whole minutes left, everybody. Let's hear what responses, rejoinders, questions you might have. There's stuff still on the screen, no?
Yes, there is. In case somebody wants to maybe just unmute and speak, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'll just read some of them from the chat. Clark has 2 questions. What do you call or label this moving energy that makes us who we are, not the body, because that's the illusionary self? Is that material energy?
The who we are substantially, that is called consciousness. And it's called, in the Bhagavad Gita, it's called superior energy. Para means superior, and Prakriti means nature. So there's lower and higher nature in the Bhagavad Gita. The lower nature is catalogs: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ego, false ego. Those are the subtle and gross material elements, and it's called Bhinna Prakriti, or inferior nature. And then there's Para Prakriti, and that's you. You are categorically different from the aforementioned cataloged energies that I just read off, and that's you. And what is it? It's consciousness. Explore consciousness. Take a look at your own awareness and your own consciousness, and you'll notice that you're not your body. Why don't more people notice it? Because nobody has any time. Everyone's busy chasing after trying to get comfortable in the material world, or at least out of debt or fear or whatever it may be. We don't take time. When I was in Hong Kong recently, I took this tram skyway all the way up. I didn't even know where I was going. And I ended up in this little village where there's a gigantic Buddha sitting there, huge, like this the size of a 7-story building. And I was standing looking up at him. And I was thinking, as I saw a plane flying by, I thought, well, somebody going in a plane, a lot of people going in a plane somewhere, trying to get somewhere. And there's the Buddha sitting there, just contemplating within. And why are millions of people coming to see him? Because they do. They come there on pilgrimage constantly. It's because he's onto something. It's called nigama. Go inside, take the journey within, find out what's really going on before you start trying to fix the external world, because it's not fixable. JM, that brought us to the top of the hour. I'm grateful for you for keeping the lights on and convening us on a regular basis. I've been missing being here. Just got back from London, where we had a retreat called RISE, R-I-S-E, and there were speakers from many different parts of the world who came there to explore these same subject matters, and it was altogether edifying. So I'm glad to be back here with all of you. This is my home away from home, right here in this Zoom call with all of you. Thank you very much, everybody. Hey, we need a ritual at the end. What do you say? Our friends high in the Himalayas, they greet each other and they say goodbye by putting their hands in the air and saying Haribol. Let's try it. Haribol.
Haribol!
Haribol.
Thanks, everyone. And even though some
Thank
of you I
you.
couldn't even see,
Haribol.
at least I saw your names. I'll hopefully see